Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Mission Matters. My name is Adam Torres, and if you'd like to apply to be a guest in the show, just head on over to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to apply. All right, so today is a very special episode. We're bringing back onto the show Dr. Kate Lund. She's a podcast host over at the Optimized Mind podcast. We're celebrating her 100th episode, which we scheduled this a while back, so I know she's over 100 now. We're going to be talking about our PodCon event that's coming up in 2 days on the 26th. So depending on when you're listening to this, if you're watching the live broadcast, then obviously you're going to see this before the conference. If you're checking out the next version, maybe the conference already happened. So either way, first off, Dr. Kate, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much, Adam. I'm really excited to be here.
All right. So first thing first, we have to do our Mission Matters Minute, and then we're going to open up a whole can of podcast fun. So just to get us kicked off, Dr. Kate, as you know, at Mission Matters, our aim and our goal is to amplify stories for entrepreneurs, executives, and experts. That's our mission. Dr. Kate, what mission matters to you?
Well, really my whole mission with the Optimized Mind and with podcasting in general is to capture the human experience of resilience. How are folks moving through and beyond challenge? How are they building something? How are they creating that resilient mindset? It's all about health, well-being, and maximizing potential.
Love it. Great having you back on. And I guess just to get us kicked off here, 100 episodes in, over 100 now. How do you feel?
I feel awesome. It's been such an amazing journey. And, I've got to be honest, Adam, when the idea of starting a podcast was first floated to me by Matt Cook, I hesitated for a minute. I felt like, wow, I've got so many things on my plate. I don't know, maybe yes, maybe no, even though I had been thinking about doing a podcast forever, right? Mm-hmm. And so I was talking about this very issue at dinner one night prior to starting the podcast. And my 15-year-old son at the time was the one who said, Mom, come on, just hit record. And the rest is history. So fortunately, we had that discussion at dinner, and I called Matt and I said, hey, I'm in. And I couldn't be more grateful and happy about that decision because it's been awesome. A great journey.
And we're grateful for you too. You were in one of the first classes, if not the first class of our Mission Matters podcast network when we were just kind of, and speaking of Matt, for everybody that's listening that's not a long-term listener to the show, Matt Cook is the director of the podcast agency. So he's the one that makes sure that the shows and the content like this gets out on time and correct. So when we were first giving this idea or even just kind of kicking it around of, well, can we bring, business leaders from different areas from different spheres of influence together to create a podcast network, a Mission Matters podcast network, and distribute the content? Like, what would that look like? What would it work like? And so you were one of the, I guess, should I say guinea pigs? We produced, we distributed, but we hadn't created a network yet. So you were one of the first, and we appreciate you sticking with us. And I don't know, I look back and to me, it starts like we just started this thing, but to think like after 100 episodes in, like what keeps you in the game? What keeps you motivated?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I really believe it's the opportunity to connect with and talk with so many interesting people because I really interview folks across domains. I talk to authors, I talk to athletes, I talk to corporate folks, entrepreneurs, parents who might be struggling, just all sorts of different folks. And I've connected with and met so many fun and cool people and heard these really inspiring stories. And I think those are the main things that keep me in the game.
So let's go a little bit further back here for a moment, because I don't think we've quite had this discussion. When did this idea of either being a broadcaster or even not even just podcast, but just creating content, where did all that start for you?
Yeah, that's also a great question, Adam. And it started a while back, actually. I've always had an interest in radio and, hearing people's stories, creating content based on those stories. And so Really, I think authentically it goes back to college when I worked at a radio station in the summers and during school breaks in the town where I grew up. And I had a lot of really cool opportunities interviewing some bigger names in that position. And it was cool because I was an intern, right? I was basically
Hmm.
just doing this in the summers and on breaks. And they gave me some really cool opportunities. Like, for example, I was able to interview Barbara Bush
Hmm.
when she had the book come out in the early 90s. And that was super fun.
And
And
you did that as an intern?
yeah, yeah. It was a really
How
cool.
cool.
I was so grateful that they placed that trust in me, right? And so that was the biggest name. But then there were some local, not local, but international tennis players. Yvonne Lendl was somebody that I interviewed.
Hmm.
um, and other folks like that. And then I did some other things, like I covered the police beat. I interviewed, the chief of police about things happening in town and just a whole mess of things. And so that translated into a radio show in college, and
Hmm.
then a broadcast journalism program at American University my senior year in college, where I was studying broadcasts and I was
Hmm.
working on various projects and interning at the White House under Bill Clinton. So that was all
You
really
casually drop these huge experiences. What do you mean? Like, how does this influence your work today? Like, this is amazing.
well. So the piece is, it's all kind of come full circle, is what I'm
Mm.
feeling like, because you know, on the White House lawn at 4 a.m. as an intern, watching the broadcasters, watching the intensity.
Wow.
It just felt like for a career, it was going to be a bit intense, right? So I always had this kind of double focus. I really knew that I wanted to become a psychologist. And so
Mm.
kind of gravitated in that direction after college.
Mhm.
Um, but never lost that interest in telling stories, hearing people's stories. And that's obviously a huge piece of being a psychologist. So now bringing the journalistic aspect of things back into the mix, I think
Mm.
really brings it all together, brings it full circle. And I'm just really excited to see where it goes and what I can build with
Mm.
it all from here.
When did you know you wanted to be a psychologist? So this is prior to these experiences working in radio and otherwise, or is it after, or is it during? Like, when did that kind of play into it?
I would say that I've always had sort of a dual interest.
Mm.
The broadcasting, the telling stories, psychology also, relates to that.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and I did various internships in high school that related to, working in the hospital and working with people. And
Mm.
in terms of study in college, it was clear that's what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
But to be honest, I wasn't ready to go back to graduate school right after college. So I worked in Washington, D.C. for a little bit, also in with a broadcast angle. I worked in public relations and marketing for the Learning Channel and the Discovery Channel and PBS. So I wasn't on the broadcast side per se, but I was on the promotion side of
Yeah.
various shows and things like that. And then that came to a point where I just knew that it was time to go back to graduate school. It was time
Mhm.
to pursue the interest in psychology. And I'm really glad I did. And I've
Yeah.
never looked back, but it's now that I want to figure out how to bring it all together,
Yeah.
his
How
story.
does that, I'm so curious about this. So like how does all your training and all your years of work influence like what you do on your show? Because it's gotta, I mean, everybody, like I'll give you my quick example. Whenever I'm talking about my show, I'm like, well, hey, I was in finance for a lot of years and I was obviously always on the phone, always talking to people. So part of me in my heart, I just feel like, now we're just recording many of the same conversations I would have been having with my client who was a CEO or a founder or something else. The difference is now, I'm looking into a camera, we're recording it and we're distributing the content, and now everybody can see it versus it was just happening in my office before, kind of like, so that's how I kind of like mentally wrap my head around what I do. I'm curious from your end how you kind of connect the two.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's obviously a relationship between the
Yeah.
two, but in my work as a podcaster, as a host, that sort of thing, I'm really listening to people's stories. I'm
Mhm.
asking them questions which I feel are relevant to the topic we're covering or the work they've done or the experiences they've had.
Mm.
But obviously, we're doing it in a very non-clinical way. And that's
Yeah.
refreshing, right? It's just hearing the story for the sake of the story,
Mm.
as opposed to,
So you get to like really be present.
right. Right. I mean,
Wow.
I'm present in my clinical work as well, but
Yeah.
this has a broader angle to it. It's
Mm.
just a different angle that I'm taking, but obviously my, history and experience in working one-on-one with people, in a clinical
Mhm.
context for over 20 years plays into it. I am able to ask relevant questions. I'm able
Yeah.
to listen really well, take in the detail and that sort of thing. So it's all connected for sure, but the
Yeah.
podcasting takes it from a broader angle.
Yeah. And you're not responsible for the patient on that angle. So it's
Right, right. And that is in many ways quite refreshing. That is
I,
true.
I bet it is. No. Oh, that's great. So, over 100 episodes in now. This is an extremely unfair question, but I love asking it. What's one of your favorite episodes?
Whew,
I know
wow.
that normally like just makes every podcaster with any type of catalog immediately goes blank.
Yeah.
Myself included. I'm like, oh man, you hit me with that one. So what's one of your favorites?
Yeah, so I've got a couple that are popping out as we speak. So the first one I would say is I was.
Besides the one we did, go ahead. No.
Oh, right, of course. There was you, and there was, yes, absolutely, Adam. You're at the top of the list. In all sincerity. But then I was fortunate enough to interview Captain Sandy Yawn from Below Deck Mediterranean.
Mm,
She had a book come out on leadership in January of 2023. So one of
mhm,
my sort of earlier interviews, and that was fascinating. She was so real, so genuine, so engaged in being on the show as well
mhm,
as sharing the content. So I really, really enjoyed that. Another one that pops to mind very quickly is an interview I did with a guy named Chuck Garcia,
mm,
who is a professor at Columbia University and wrote a book called The Moment,
mhm,
integrating emotional intelligence with various philosophical constructs. And he shares in the book so many poignant experiences that he's had, mountain climbing, and some really scary moments where he almost fell off a mountain, and how that came back around, and some other moments related to 9/11 and that sort of thing. So fascinating guy, illustrating resilience in such a human way,
mm,
and also integrating these ideas of emotional intelligence, which I believe are central to resilience. um,
yeah.
so there's Chuck, and I've interviewed a few athletes who I've been really inspired by. A guy named Nick Karwowski, who was a high-level athlete in college, then went on to be an international triathlete, then
Mm,
ran into some pretty significant health challenges, and now is coming out on the other side of that and building a really robust fitness business.
mm.
So he's another one that pops out. And then, the list could go on and on, but I think those are the three that really come to mind as you ask that question.
Is there anything that you've learned about yourself in going through these 100 plus interviews? Anything that, kind of surprised you even about yourself?
Hmm. Yeah, that's really that's an interesting question. And I think, I can't say that anything really major has come out
Mhm,
about me understanding myself, but I've definitely honed in on areas of, my interviewing style and skill that I'd like to
mhm.
improve and shift and that sort of thing. I'm very critical of myself when I
Yeah.
listen back to the interviews. So if there's one thing I'd like to
Wait,
shift,
you listen to
probably that.
them?
I do.
Oh my gosh, you're so brave.
I know. Well, so here's the thing. I listen to the raw audio in case
Yeah,
I want to cut or shift
yeah,
anything before I send it off to the team, the Mission Matters team.
yeah.
Um, and I never feel any stress when I listen to it on that level. It's when it comes out
Yeah.
and I listen to it that I'm
Wait,
like,
you listened to it twice? Oh
yeah,
my
yeah,
gosh, that's torture. Not because your show's great, but I mean, I couldn't listen to myself. I tried to, and I get like, 2 minutes in, and I'm like, no, just stop, just stop.
yeah.
I
Well,
can't.
well, it's true. It's anxiety provoking, right?
Hmm.
It's like, oh no, did I say that? Whatever. But so it's from that perspective, it's an evolving process, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an
But
evolving process.
oh my gosh, talk to me a little bit more about your process. That's so interesting. I didn't know you listened to them. That's amazing. Like talk to me about your process.
Yeah, well, so the process is so I'll invite a guest on the show.
Yeah.
I'll send them the calendar link. If I don't know the person, we have like a 20-30 minute
Mhm.
conversation prior to the interview on a different day. And then they
Yeah.
sign up for the interview. So I kind of get to know someone, get to know their
So you do like
story
a
and their work.
pre-call and you get a good feel and you get to build a little rapport first. Yeah.
Exactly,
Mm.
exactly. And then, they sign up for an interview slot. And so the day before the interview, I, do a little bit of research. I prep sort of a general set of questions or
Mhm.
direction that I want to go. I don't follow it to the T. We just kind of let the conversation evolve.
Yeah.
But I do prep on that level. And then, we do the interview, and then next day or two, I listen to it.
Yeah.
I prepare it, send it off to the team, cut what I need to cut. Hopefully there's nothing. Like, I love those interviews where it just flows and I don't have to
Mhm.
cut anything except
Yeah.
for the preamble discussion before I hit record, or not before I hit record,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. Yeah.
before it starts. Those are my favorite, but anyway. And then, send it off to the team, and that's that. And then, generally speaking, listen to each interview after it
Yeah.
comes out. And then I send it off to the guest and I try to tag them on social media and all that stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. How fun. And I think, and I like to, and I asked you this question about your process because I feel like every podcaster, they just have their different process, their different thing that lets them kind of do what they do. I know when I do a warm up call many times. Sometimes I don't.
Mhm.
But I like to make sure that I'm not too prepared. I'm prepared, but I can't know everything. I learned
Right.
pretty early on that I'm not an actor in that sense to where I can be like, let me see. Let me ask you a question that I already know the answer to. I mean, that doesn't really always work for me.
Right.
Like that spontaneity and that like I like how you said you kind of you have a general game plan, but everything's not scripted. I find for me,
Right.
not saying, for some people they can get away with really scripted. For myself, I gotta kind of let it flow. I gotta like kind of like let where the conversation goes. I feel like I try to put myself mentally in the learner's position, and I try to think like I am the audience, and we're learning together. Like I'm taking the audience on a journey, and I just happen to be steering, but we're learning together. Like that's my kind of like mental game, if you will.
Absolutely. That makes so much sense. And yeah, very similar to mine as well. And one other sort of question that I always ask my guests towards the end of the interview, kind of shift away from, the amazing work they're doing or whatever it is
Mm,
we're talking about. And I really want to know what defines them. What are their
mm,
hobbies? What are their passions outside of, the work or whatever it is we've been
yeah.
discussing. So I always love that question because I get such a range of answers.
Yeah. I want to spend some of the time we have here on PodCon. So again, if somebody's watching this live, then you're obviously before PodCon comes. But for those that are watching the playback, it's in 2 days on September 26th. So first off, to kind of set the stage here, this will be our first annual PodCon. This is where we're bringing together many of the different hosts. Dr. Kate's coming into town. She'll be on stage. She'll be speaking. And we're bringing together our podcast hosts from the Mission Matters Podcast Network, really just for a day of fun and collaborating around podcasts, around the promotion, around growing podcasts, really everything podcast. So, Dr. Kate, first off, how excited are you to come in town and meet some of your cohort members and some of the other podcasters?
I am so psyched. I'm like really excited about it. It's going to be awesome. And it is so much fun, right? To finally have the opportunity to meet my fellow
Yeah,
podcasters who, I've been in touch with in various ways. And I've had, for example, Ken Eslick, I've had him on my
mhm,
show.
yeah.
And that was super
Oh,
fun.
that's right. And Ken's coming in town. He'll be on stage too. Oh, that's so fun. You're right. So some
Yep.
of these, you've even had each other on each other's shows.
Exactly. So that'll be a lot of fun. Yeah, so
Wow.
I'm really excited. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, and I think that it's one of these things. To me, it's a little surreal. It's a little bit different because we've been, everything's online or digital. I've met some of the hosts in person, so I know they're real people, right? Obviously, but to get everybody into one conference, one room, put an audience, get butts in seats, and to put an audience out there and to start having people talk about their shows. We're gonna have booths, and these booths are gonna have these like amazing pop-up banners and cards and just ways that people can learn about the shows. To me, it's kind of like, okay, the digital product side, I see it, and that's obviously what we do: audio, broadcast, distribution. But then this is kind of almost like a physical component to it because you can actually see, touch, you know what I mean, the cards, the other stuff, and just that other layer of feeling like and connection with the audience because we'll have a live studio audience as well. So I think it's going to be next level, and it's the first annual, and I feel like we're going to look back in 5-10 years and we're going to be like, wow, do you remember the first one?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think it's fantastic. And I love what you say about, connecting, right? Connecting
Yeah.
with the audience, helping folks understand the story, the ideas behind it, and then connecting with fellow hosts and learning about other shows and learning about,
Mm.
where everybody's coming from. I just love it.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Kate, this has been a lot of fun having you back on the show. I'm going to be seeing you in person in a couple days for PodCon, first annual PodCon in Los Angeles. That being said, if anybody wants to follow up with you, connect, follow your journey on social media, follow your podcast or otherwise, I mean, how do people do that?
Yeah, so I have a website, www.katelundspeaks.com. And I'm very active on LinkedIn and also Instagram. Lots of stuff on my podcast on both of those platforms.
Amazing. And for everybody listening, just so you know, we'll put some links in the show notes so that you can just click on them and head right on over. And speaking to the audience, if this is your first time with Mission Matters and you haven't hit the subscribe or follow button yet, we welcome you to do so. This is a daily show. Each and every day, we're bringing you new guests, new content, and hopefully new inspiration to help you along the way on your journey as well. So again, hit that subscribe or follow button. And Dr. Kate, man, looking forward to seeing you in a couple of days. Thanks again for coming on.
Awesome. Thank you, Adam. Thank you for having me.